Hey guys, it's John with another episode of the JRB climbing system. So today I'm going to dive in a little deeper on the two primary load-bearing friction knots, where these are the Michoacan knots. And if you recall from the other videos, I've got a pair of these tied on both sides of the line. And so what I'm going to do is show you how to tie it, show you how to untie it, show you how to maintain it. So the first point is, so here I've got a strand of aplocks I've been climbing for only a week now, and a pair of those knots. So I've got a 75% ratio. This is a 6mm cord on an 8mm oplox. And today I'm going to try a test where I'm going to go to a 7mm cord and see how that performs. As you're probably aware, the Michoacan is very similar to Blake's hitch in construction. And Blake's hitch works with the same diameter rope for the friction knot as the cord you're tying onto. So we're going to give that a try and see how that works for us. And so what I want to show you here is with these set of knots that I've got configured. The first point is I've tied the Michoacans and I've tied them into a bend, and I'm using the hunter's bend, the secure bend. And the working length of this, I've got some long tails. Long tails are a good best practice. Number one, just because they provide additional strength to the bend. Should a bend ever try to pull out, it'll try to pull the tails in. And number two, it gives me some flexibility if I want to lengthen these. The exact length of these, well, that depends on your physical size and the height of your bridge. So for example, when I'm sitting in my saddle, the top of my beaner that's load bearing is right at my lips. I could kiss that top of the beaner. And for me, it's about the length of my forearm to my fist to create a working distance. That's the perfect distance so that in a sit, I reach to the top and I can break both of these. The exact distance for you and your setup might vary, and that's why I recommend 6 feet of rope, give you some tunability, or whatever your height is. Roughly, I'm a little less than 6 feet tall. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I am going to show you how to maintain these. Because they're friction knots, they're taking friction, they're moving up and down. What we want to do occasionally is just walk them through a little bit. So I'll take that loop and I'll take this and I'll just spin it a little and redistribute the wear. So we're not constantly placing wear on the same point in the loop. It's still called a Prusik loop, even though it's not a Prusik knot. Just do that occasionally to distribute wear, and these will last so much longer. Okay, and so now I'm going to take one of these off and I'm going to replace it. So the hunter's bend, if you've ever tried to untie a double fisherman's bend that's been loaded, it's quite an endeavor. And the thing I like about the hunter's bend, also known as the rigger's bend, it's in the Ashley Book of Knots, I believe it's 1425A. You'll double check me on that, is how easy I can break it after it's been loaded. So this has been climbed on many times, and now I'm going to break that knot. So I bend the ends back, and there, I've broken it. It's a little more secure, I think, or stable than the Zeppelin in terms of stability in your bag, but I've also climbed with the Zeppelin. The hunter's bend is known well for being secure on slippery ropes, and these Prusik are kind of slippery. And then it's a simple matter of taking off the Michoacan. Around my neck, I've got a 7mm cord that I'm going to tie in its place. So the first thing I want you to see is how I prepare these. So when you cut a strand, it is going to fray, immediately going to fray. And so what I do to secure that is I flame it. So I've got a lighter here, and I've got an old rag at the ready, and what I'm going to do is I am going to flame this, I don't know, maybe 10-12 seconds. I do it right until it's about to catch. I get a nice ball there, and then I quickly swipe it with the rag, and then I get a nice clean burn. That'll cool down for a second. The other side I'll double check. That's the factory cut, and it's looking pretty good. Okay, so now how do I tie the Michoacan? It's very similar to Blake's hitch. We start, and you can tie these in the same polarity on both sides. They don't need to be a mirror image of one another. I go over and I make 4 turns. So this is 1 turn, this is 2 turns, this is 3 turns, and this is 4 turns. Now, for a Blake's hitch, you would go down under and up through these 2. For a Michoacan, you go down under and up through 1. And you formed the basic 4-turn Michoacan friction hitch. Because I am using 8mm cord, which has got a much smaller surface area, I'm going to go with the 5-turn variant of the Michoacan. I don't need this when I'm going with 9mm or 10mm cord, but with the 8mm, I prefer the 5-turn Michoacan, and then back up through 1. So there you've got the Michoacan ready to absorb load. And I usually orient it in this fashion. I spin it around because it just kind of feeds the rope out nicely for your foot loop on this side. And then I close it into a bend. And I use, again, the hunter's bend. So this is the way I tie it. And you definitely want to inspect this knot carefully. I start with an overhand loop, creating an overhand knot in this fashion, with the interlocking portions of the rope on my right. Overhand loop, overhand knot. With the other strand of rope, I go through the hole, so it goes in the same way the tail came out. I go around, over, and then I follow. This is the tail of the other rope. I follow it through and form another overhand knot on this side. So if you pause there and look at this carefully, you've got 2 overhand knots that are interlocking. If I hold them here and wiggle them, you can see. And you can double check it at this stage it's symmetrical. You've got 2 strands bound by 1, and you've got 2 strands bound by 1. As you draw this tight, that forms your hunter's bend. And if I was sizing it up against the other one, I'll try to get it exactly the same size, which you can adjust it a little by feeding rope in and pulling rope out and fine tune it. And when you pull that tight, again, I've got some really nice long tails here. You can always cut it off, but you can't add it on. And when you draw that hunter's bend tight, it's got a really nice symmetry, if you can see that, of 2 horizontal bars on the one direction, 2 horizontal bars, and on the back side it's got these 2 crossing bars going in a diagonal direction. So that's the hunter's bend, and I'm going to test that today with 7mm on 8. And you got to set these. I've learned that you got to set them nicely, but I did some tests in the basement last night, and it seemed to hold pretty well. And so I'm going to do a climb on that and see how that works. But I wanted to take this opportunity to show you how I form these loops. And below on the system, I've got the best friend knots, which I do tie in 6mm. I'll show you those real quick. So these are tied using the head-in hitch. Now I've got some friends tying these with another pair of Michoacans. I just like the head-in because it's just so stable. This knot should really never absorb a load, but it's always ready to. And it slides pretty easily. It just holds its friction level, whatever you set it at. If you keep it nice and loose, it'll slide nice and loose. If you keep it nice and tight, it'll still slide tight. So you can really kind of adjust the tension of that however you want it, and always know it's ready to take a load should you need it to. If you've got any questions, please leave them. You guys are learning now about this system, that this is not a system for anybody who's afraid to tie knots. You've got to be willing to tie knots, and you got to be able to willing to trust your life on them. Have them inspected, but you don't need to tie them at the tree. That's an important point. And I have been asked, can I use devices? Can I use mechanical devices instead? I've got a couple of Ropeman devices here. Right on my table, I've got a couple of ascenders, and these are all ascenders. I use these for ascending in trees and other methods. But I don't like these devices because it's not their intended use, as I'm aware, for them to absorb your body weight while you're on a sit. These are devices are meant to be used in transition, and so I really don't have any use for that. The only thing I'm using in transition in my system is the garter hitch, and it works great. So I've got no need for mechanical devices on this system, and I don't recommend that you engage those devices, and if you do, that you ensure that you're doing so in a manner that is recommended by the manufacturer. Okay, everybody, be safe and let me know if you've got any questions. Thanks.